So we are live on YouTube in the larder, and my name is Jen Toxvig, and I'm talking to Chris Grady. Hi, Chris.
Hello there.
So I know we have many things to talk about, and we don't want to. Oh, I've stuck the camera on you. There we go. We have many things to talk about, and I don't want to keep you here all night. So I'd like to ask you to summarise the state of musical theatre in the UK in the space of 3 minutes. No, I'm kidding. I do want to talk to you about all of your things, but to begin with, I would like you to give a brief, this is the state of the nation.
Right, okay. I sense, in one word, I think the word is exciting.
Oh, that's good.
With enormous potential, and a lot better than it was 30 years ago. Over the last 3 or 4 years, it feels as if there's been a real shift. And very slowly, and I think there's probably 20 years to go, the development of new musical theatre is moving towards the same position as the development of new playwriting, in that it is a respected art form. It's got a hell of a long way to go because, because for 40 years, new playwriting has been nurtured by theatres that have been funded by the Arts Council, the Traverse, the Royal Court, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And it's been an honoured profession, and there have been new plays being done, and of course any playwright would say never enough. But until about 5 or 6 years ago, musical theatre was an art form that dared not speak its name in terms of the development.
I'm interested that you say 5 or 6 years ago. Do you think it's that recent?
Well, I wish I could remember my dates, but there was a conference that I ran when I was running the very early stages of Musical Theatre Network. And at that, we persuaded the Arts Council to come and be on a panel. And Emma Stenning was the acting head of drama for Arts Council London. And she came along with others and attended a conference which also had members of the National Endowment for the Arts over and various people from other parts of the planet. And up until that moment, musical theatre didn't have a line in any budget in the Arts Council for development.
That really wasn't that long ago, was it? I remember that event.
Following that, there was a kind of conversation behind closed doors, and at last, musical theatre got a line in a budget.
Yay!
It was a line in a budget without any number attached to it to start with, but at least it was a line. So it meant that people had to discuss musical theatre and then decide not to give it any money rather than not have the discussion in the first place. So fast forward to now, we have 3 NPOs that are in the process and in the business of developing musical theatre.
And they are just for those
Musical Theatre Network, Mercury Musical Development, and Perfect Pitch.
Yeah.
Now, there's still no houses that are dedicated to musical theatre in the developmental world in the same way as the Traverse or the Royal Court or others are. There are no companies dedicated.
No, that's true. That's true, isn't it? I never think of that. Yeah. Do you think there should be a house?
Yes.
What do you think we would get from... So here's my thought about houses. I know that we do that very successfully with the Royal Court, and I know the Royal Shakespeare Company develop new work, and the National, I know we very successfully do that with straight theatre in this country. But I always think that when you have a building, you're responsible for the building. So much so that your budget just gets sucked up by maintenance of the building and people to run the building. And
I think that's a very fair comment, and in a sense the building is unimportant. An organisation dedicated to producing and presenting new musical theatre, I think, is important. So you could have the equivalent of a small version of the National Theatre of Scotland, which is in a sense an organisation without its own home. I think that's changing slowly, as opposed to the National Theatre of Great Britain.
They very successfully made that model work for them.
They did. But we don't have any black boxes or small off West End or off UK theatre spaces that have got a team in there that are paid within Arts Council funded and local authority funded budgets to nurture and develop new work in musical theatre. Now, one argument is that the work isn't good enough yet, which is a fair argument. There's only one in a generation of new musical theatre writers that's any good, is another argument.
Who made that argument? Wow.
Well, that was one of the very early arguments that came through when the Vivian Ellis Prize was pulled down by its board and stopped. Was that it was kind of it wasn't needed because, you know, the cream will rise to the top.
Oh my God.
So the Vivian Ellis Prize, which was really the only UK search for new work and showcase of new work in the country, was stopped, which was a great shame. However, what has happened is that we now do have 3 R&D units, so that's good. But we still don't have really any funded organisations that are specialising in musical theatre.
I think it's really difficult that companies that are developing early stage work, it's sort of like trying to inject something into a place where you just can't find a vein. Do you know what I mean? It feels a little bit like...
I think that's a very fair comment. And there are some amazing artistic directors who are passionate about new work and passionate about musical theatre and making, you know, and booking work and making work happen. But similarly, you know, we don't have the equivalent of a Welsh National Opera or an Opera North or whatever, i.e. a company that is dedicated to producing work in repertoire, from the classic repertoire through to the contemporary repertoire. We don't have an Aldeburgh Festival, the equivalent of an organisation that's dedicated to contemporary work and both the classic and the new. Musical theatre doesn't have any of that infrastructure in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there is, let's go down the there's no market for it road. Do you think there is a market for it?
Is there a market for musical theatre?
Yeah.
I think the West End filling houses every night proves there is a market.
So just devil's advocate that.
Yeah. I think that there is a market for new and exciting work in plays and musical theatre, and that's, you know, that's something that you know, an exciting contemporary theatre like the National Theatre or the Almeida or the whichever theatre can do a classic play or a contemporary play, and if it's stacked up high enough in terms of its sellability, it can pack the place.
Yeah, I agree.
We're stuck in a sense by believing that musical theatre has to be in for-profit houses playing to a tourist audience.
Well, aren't we stuck in the West End model a little bit? Aren't we stuck still in the idea that an American book musical 2-act proscenium arch presentation of a big commercially successful show is what musical theatre ought to be?
I think that's the perception of maybe the audience to a certain extent. But then maybe the audience also thinks that in the main, going to a play is also a 2-act straight event. There's a long journey to go. What I'm saying, I started by saying that we're in an incredibly encouraging position because I think now at last there was a lot of energy behind the development of new work and the exploration of classic work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not English National Opera should be doing Sunset Boulevard is up for lots of debate. But at least a major company is exploring.
Yeah, I mean, anyone doing it is nice. You know, anyone putting on a musical is all right by me. So in terms of, isn't there a new smaller venue coming into the West End that's specifically going to be for musical theatre, or is that a dirty rumor that I shouldn't believe?
I'm out of touch with that one, if it's true.
There was a rumor that Cameron was going to bring in there was a small venue being developed.
He's producing a new theatre. He's adapting the Ambassadors, which is going to become the Sondheim Theatre. And that will be for, as far as I understand it, will be for transfers of regional production.
That's it. That's what I was thinking.
I don't think the intention is that Delphont Mackintosh Theatre will be for musicals.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just dreamed.
It's quite possible that something extraordinary out in the regions ends up in a Delphont Mackintosh Theatre. But no, it's, as I understand it, it's developing a place for those productions that are not suitable for going into a big West End house. Okay.
So do you feel, because I know you have your ear to the ground in many places, do you feel that the chatter changing about musical theatre?
Yeah, I think so, because there's a new generation of artistic directors coming through who are as comfortable working in the musical theatre world as they are in the classic plays or the new play world. There's a perception that there's a perception that musical theatre can be adventurous. I mean, in a sense, London Road for me kind of moved the goalposts substantially, and other pieces will do the same thing. They'll keep shifting the goalposts, yeah, I think the chatter is changing, and I think the existence now of a musical theatre writing course that you're obviously running at Mountview will make another bit of difference, because it will prove to the glorious powers that be in the UK that musical theatre can be something that can be studied, nurtured, developed within an academic situation.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it very much. I'm excited by everything that comes into the room, and by I mean, we set out to do something in which innovation takes a major role. And it does seem that a lot of people who are planning new shows, not just the people I encounter on the course, but anywhere, have innovation in mind, have new ideas, and aren't necessarily aiming for that West End model. And that's amazing. I feel like we should do more to tie ourselves together with the producers, not to push your program, but I do think that those collaborative relationships are really important, in terms of not just having relationships with producers who are building based and feel like they're the wizard in the Emerald City, you know, that thing where it feels like we're all working together, and we get rid of those more hierarchical models, and suddenly we're all making work together in collaborative partnerships. Feels like a thing to me that is coming through now, and is going to be helpful in the creation of more and more work more easily.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be the people running the major national companies, subsidized companies, and major commercial companies who are, as you might put it, the kind of wizard in the tower, Emerald Tower. But there are also a fantastic array of new producers, creative producers coming through, who know the only way they're going to make work happen is to make it themselves.
Yeah,
there's no point in waiting to be appointed as Cameron's number two, or to set up a new division of AETG. They're going to go off and sit in a coffee shop, network, connect, find the new writers, find the new directors, and make work happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels to me, this might be a weird thing to say, but it feels like it's less money oriented. It feels like it's less about how much commercial profit can we make, and more about what kind of work are we driven to make. Yeah. Does that seem true to you?
That feels true. I think that the West End will always be a commercial centre, and therefore it will always have its array of people who are taking in a show believing they can make a quick buck. The most successful pieces of musical theatre in the world, in a sense, were driven from a belief they were making art. And it ended up making money as well. That's fantastic.
Right.
And I think that's true of the new producers coming through. Of course, they've got an eye on the main chance. The aim is, if you're producing a piece of work, that it will pay you.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, no one else is going to. And that means there's got to be enough people buying tickets to want to see it, to make a profit. But start by making a piece of work that you're proud of, and that you're going to live with for the next 15, 20 years.
Right. Are we looking at new ways of engaging audiences, new audiences? Are we looking at, how much of a feeling do you get that there's new kinds of audience engagement being explored in the business right now?
In musical theatre?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in theatre in general, across the whole spread, I think there is always different kinds of engagement going on. I think that the drama and performance art world is 20 years ahead, maybe, in terms of exploration. But then you look at, something like London Road suddenly makes leaps and bounds changes in the way that a piece of theatre is made.
But in terms of audience engagement, the audience it wasn't immersive in any way, was it, London Road?
No. But it made a heck of a change. No. And
I mean, absolutely.
Theatre, why not?
Absolutely. Verbatim theatre is a wonderful thing. And anything that treats a score, I think, in a new way is exciting. Yeah, I guess I had kind of hoped that I might see more of a proliferation of musicals online, or more of a proliferation of pop-up stuff, or I don't know, maybe we're not quite there yet. I keep wanting to make a musical on my tube journey on the way into work. So I guess I'm hoping for the day when I encounter more things in unusual places.
Yeah, there's nothing to stop you.
No, there is
You're
nothing.
creative. Make it. Break new ground. And there isn't very much that I see in terms of widespread theatre in being made in that kind of way yet.
No, I guess
a little bit. There's a little bit coming along, but not very much.
That was more of a normal social event, I suppose. So how is the program going? Tell me about the course.
The creative producing course.
Yeah.
We're having great fun. It's first year, so it's a small cohort this year.
So just for those who don't know, this is Mountview Academy of Theatre Arts.
Mountview Academy, which is a conservatoire based in Wood Green, which specialises in training undergraduate actors and musical theatre performers, and now actor musicians. It also has a postgraduate one-year course for actors and musical theatre performers. And now it has a small suite of MA programs. There's an MA for musical directors. There's an MA for theatre directors, which actually has been around for some years and has grown over the last few years. It's been around for about 5 years, I think. And now there are two new kids on the block. One, Miss Toxvig, with the musical theatre writing course, and me with the creative producing course.
Nice.
Yes, we have a mix of UK and international. We have a German, Portuguese, and 3 British producers. They have all got experience of working and making theatre in their own worlds, and are now coming together and taking a year out of their lives effectively to focus on the craft of producing. And the nuts and bolts and the tools that they might use in the future, and exploring how they may then be able to break the rules, to misquote one of your own tutors from NYU. And they will end up with an MA, or I hope, and their final sort of thesis project, as it were, will be a practice-based project, creating some work that will be seen by the public, and which they will then explore how theoretically they might exploit that into the real big bad world.
That's great. I mean, I like the idea that certainly on the writing, so we're doing also an MA in musical theatre writing, and I like the idea that these one-year MAs are a ramp up into the business. I've described it as that the students came in at 20 miles an hour, and then we might make them go at 60 miles an hour during the course, and then they might come out going at 40 miles an hour instead of 20. That was a very bad analogy.
I've got a fun analogy, and I think I might be suggesting that mine's slightly different. I think I've definitely, with some of them, they've arrived at 70 miles an hour, and it's a process actually of slowing it down a little bit, because in some cases they are already opening a venue in London, producing a show simultaneously with doing the MA, transferring a show from Edinburgh, working flat out on the development of video work at the same time as doing the MA. So they're moving at pretty much the speed limit.
Yes, they are.
And we are aiming to slow them down a little bit and, in a sense, develop the rigor that goes into producing, where you really see every single corner and know how to ask the difficult questions to make a project more successful. And they're meeting loads of people. That's part of the process, that they will each have a mentor in a senior in an organization hopefully of their choice. I mean, they've made some choices of organizations, and so far every single person we've asked has said yes.
Amazing.
And they'll spend some time with them. They're also meeting everybody from very, very highly regarded playwrights with whom they're exploring the process of the craft of writing, through to international producers who happen to be in town going, let's talk about what we're doing in Australia or New York. And those kind of conversations are happening, so that they're getting a whole mix of people coming through the room as well, with completely different opinions, which is always good.
It is always good, and lots of nice provocations as well.
Yes.
Which is lovely for us too, and some collaboration between the courses, which makes me happy.
I think one of my favorite provocations was actually in the last week or so, which is, why on earth is it called creative producing?
Well, why is it called creative producing?
Because there are too many people, I think, in this world, within the theatre business and the arts business in general, who think of a producer as the person who raises the money and then balances the books, whilst in the main, the successful producers of new work have an enormous creative input into the development of that piece. Whether it is they who engender the idea and then move it forward by bringing a creative team together, or whether it's they have been approached by an arts organization or a writer or a director to help move a project forward. In the main, those producers are being extremely creative in their development work.
So when you say that, do you think they have an input into the content of a show? For example, do they do dramaturgy?
They will absolutely have an opinion on all of that, and they would be working with the writer or the director, depending upon who it might be, to assess whether a dramaturg might be needed. That's not to say they are going to be the dramaturg at all.
I was going to say that. I mean, I feel that there's so much work being made these days where everybody does several different jobs simultaneously, and that so many theatre makers these days are multi-discipline now, that it wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, I do it. I produce independently small scale work, and simultaneously I'm a director on it, or a co-director, or simultaneously I'm writing it, or whatever. I'm constantly doing many different jobs. And I guess for me the new thing is, I would never call myself a producer, but I clearly am. Sometimes I get funding, I pay people, I hire people, I write up budgets. So I am a producer as well as everything else. So I'm interested that where I guess it's about where people choose to major, isn't it? I major as a writer, and I have an add-on of everything else I do, I guess.
I think in each of the cases of the producers we're working with in the cohort, and most of the producers I know who are full-time producers, they want to be involved at an idea stage, the earliest possible stage, so that they can have an opinion and help to nurture the piece along. That's not to say they're going to go off and sit at the piano and write the tunes, but they may be going, we're 20 minutes in, doesn't it feel as if there's a dip here, to the creative team, at which the creative team go, no, it's exactly right. Or, yes, let's have a look at it. So in a sense, the producer's there to ask the difficult questions. And then hopefully gather together the most skilled people to find the answers.
I remember a very well-known producer who shall remain nameless because it's probable one day that I'll encounter them again, but saying to me, the producer is the creative one, not the writers. It's the producer. It's all about the producer. And I just thought that's probably taking it just a step too far in the other direction.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is.
But I do love the idea that that it's so collaborative these days that we all do have the ability to understand at least each other's jobs. You know, I like that I know what walk by trade is. I like that I understand when a producer talks about what they're doing, that I get what that is. And also that I understand, if I'm crafting a show, how I can best help the producer as well as the actors and the director. You know, that I have some understanding of all that stuff is really important.
It is really important. There was as someone said, I was chatting, listening to a director talking a little while ago, and they kind of went, well, I'm really good at working with 70 people in a room, and you're very good at budgets. So leave me to get on with that, and you do the budgets. And whilst I didn't agree with that at all, what I did feel was that actually they'd missed the point slightly. Before both of those things comes the idea. Yeah. And the shaping of the idea to get to the point where you know you need 70 people in a room.
Unless you're getting the idea from the 70 people in the room, in which case.
Absolutely. So I think for me, the creative bit comes from when the idea is being fashioned and shaped and explored. That's when the creative bit comes along. Now, in some ways, as somebody so rightly said, a creative producer should be a tautology. We should not need the word creative, but for as long as somebody says, no, they're the guys that do the budget, we'll need the word creative in the course title for the moment anyway.
It is a little bit like hill, hill, hill. You know, all those places that are called the word for hill in Gaelic, and then we forgot that was the word for hill, so we put the word hill afterwards. It is a little bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talk to me about Producers Pool, because this is something that you've just taken over quite recently.
Yeah, it's been in existence for a couple of years. It's a monthly gathering point for people who call themselves producers to have a drink and connect and meet each other and see whether there are collaborative ideas that could happen, or sit in a corner and moan simultaneously about something, if that's what they want to do. And it was there was a point when the person who's organising it, Julie, went, I can't cope with it anymore because I've got other projects on the go. And she asked me whether I'd take on kind of coordinating it for a year or so.
In fact, in a thing in the West End currently, I believe.
Yeah, so so I've started working on it working with Salt and Stage One, and growing it a little bit. So at the moment, there's between 45 and 50 producers turn up once a month and have a drink or a cup of coffee, or more than one drink and more than one cup of coffee, and explore how they could connect with each other. And that's a range from sort of old greybeards who've been around a long time and have lots of wisdom, through to people who are currently studying at Central or Birkbeck or Mountview, or just doing it. So it's a good mix.
It's really lovely, and it's literally only just crossed my mind that I could come along because I produce something.
There you go. And we're connecting into over 1,000 people who have done the Stage One weekend producing course that's Society London Theatre run, and that course has been going 30 years. I think I did the first one 30 years ago.
Did you really?
I did. And other people have done the course and gone on to make lots of money and been very successful.
So how often do producers collaborate with each other? Is that an urban myth, or is that happening?
Oh, phenomenally happening. Yes, absolutely. I mean, they collaborate in kind of 2 or 3 different ways. One is they will form a partnership and make a project happen together. The second is that one of them will lead and others will follow. So, for example, if you look at the poster for Dames at Sea, which Martin Platt has just opened on Broadway yesterday, I think, the poster looks like almost the whole of the New York Telephone Directory above the title, and those will all be, Martin Platt, as far as I understand, leading the pack and doing the main work of being a producer, and a load of the others coming along, raising a load of money in order to help to make it happen.
So basically what you're saying is it's crowd producing. Is that what it is?
Yes, that's quite a good phrase. Absolutely.
I like that. I mean,
I suppose that there's a third one, which is that a piece may be developed at one level by a particular producer. It might be done at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, or it might be done in a regional house or something else like that. And then other producers come on board in order to move it up the tree, as it were. So, for example, if someone wants to bring a show into the West End, then it's more advantageous to have a regular old guard member of SALT on the team in order to get the best possible deals and things happening. I think if you arrive as a new kid on the block in the West End, it might be a bit more painful than it is if you've gone through some of the battles in the past.
You already speak West End, then.
That's right. I think you do a little bit.
That's helpful.
And I have to say, I'm kind of having great pleasure in reading Julius Green's book on how to be a West End producer, and it's deeply painful, and it's kind of, you sit there going, blimey, you must be barking mad to want to do this. Don't
you have to remortgage your house and risk everything? Put your shirt off the. Don't you have to just risk everything to get a show in town?
Yes. Well, there are so many extraordinary examples of people doing that, and Les Mis being, a perfect example of a man going out and remortgaging his house in order for the show to happen.
Yeah, that kind of paid off, though, huh?
It did, but it might not have done.
Yeah. So is this you reading other people's books? But there's plenty of wisdom in yours. Tell me a little bit about your.
I love those segues.
Just read yours.
Just read mine. Yes. So I've written a book called Your Life in Theatre.
Yes. I've written down My Life in Theatre because when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, it's about my life in theatre. So that was my note to myself. It's called My Life in Theatre because obviously I thought it was
Jen's life in theatre. Or maybe there's a new version which actually you could just have printed with your own name on it.
Yes, with your name. Your own name adventure.
Yeah. And you could then add in little bits. But yes, it starts from kind of the mewling and puking person wanting to be an actor and the kind of things that might be helpful for you to know, or wanting to get into any form of theatre, through to kind of bits of advice on taking shows to Edinburgh and developing shows and just exploring the whole process of being part of the theatre world for the next X years of your life. It's specifically designed for people who want to be self-generating in work. So if you're just wanting to be an actor and sit at the telephone and wait for your agent to ring you, then you're probably not going to get as much out of the book as if you want to make theatre and get away from that telephone and go and make stuff happen for yourself. And that's the idea behind the book.
And it's very much a dip in to it kind of book, isn't it?
It's a loo book, really. You can go it very gently. Or I'm told it can be used as a kind of daily meditative practice, as somebody told me that they were doing. They had it by their bed and they read sort of a page or a section every day as part of their meditative practice. That's nicer than
loo book. I think I prefer that.
And although it's called Your Life in Theatre, because it had to be called something, there are people who are composers and classical musicians and all sorts of people who have actually bought it and found it useful. And it's a gathering of a lot of blogs that I've been writing over some years. And I continue to write blogs on a weekly basis that are hopefully a bit provocative sometimes.
And they are on your website, which I'm just going to do a little plug for now because it's chrisgrady.org. Is that right?
chrisgrady.org. www.chrisgrady.org.
And you do CGO surgeries as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So CGO, chrisgrady.org surgeries, they are pay what you can, 1 hour sessions for individual creative artists to come and just explore where they are in their journey. So I have people coming because they've got a very particular project that they're working on and they'd just like to share it and talk about it and see whether between us we can come up with any next ideas for them. I get people arriving who are completely stuck and overwhelmed with their world and trying to do a little bit of kind of helping there. Or maybe someone who's got quite a lot of projects that they're thinking about and they're trying to get them prioritized and worked through. And yet it's a 1 hour session. And I've done it for the last 8 years now. So 200 to 300 people, I suppose. And they range from filmmakers to composers to visual artists to monumental sculptors to choreographers, you name it. In a sense, as long as they know about their artistry, my job's to be there to help ask some questions to help them find their way through it.
And you are magnificent at it. I can testify to that. How do you do it? How do you sit and reflect back? What's that secret?
Well, first of all, I think it helps that I'm excited by someone's enthusiasm for their art. I don't know them from Adam usually, and I don't know whether they're any good. So that's an enormous advantage, because I
make the assumption from the get-go they are a genius.
I have to presume that what they're doing, there is an audience for, and they're good at it.
That's really lovely. And actually, wouldn't it help us all, I think, and I include myself in this, to try and think every time we go into a meeting with somebody, I'm about to meet with someone who really knows what they're doing. And, you know, we can have and I really know what I'm doing, and we should have just an equal conversation between two people who are confident in their craft. I just think so much.
I think the same going to a theatre. I always go to the theatre believing I'm going to have a good time and expecting it to be good. Of course, it's not always good, but if I go in feeling low and, oh my God, I've got to go and see another piece of theatre.
Oh, like the way I
do. Don't do it. And then the other thing that I do is to try and listen attentively and to try and hear what they're saying, which might not always be what comes out in the words, as it were.
Yeah.
And then there are just some very basic tools, really. You know, if they're trying to make a piece of work that needs an audience, then the very simple thing is, who's the audience?
Who's the audience? That's the biggest question, isn't it, that we should be asking ourselves, I think. And it's the first one that we asked the writers. It's the first thing we talked about. Who are we telling stories to? What stories are we telling, and who's listening to that stuff?
And that's my description is, who do you want on the front row? Name me 5 people, give them a character map, exactly as you would if you were writing a story about them. How old are they? What's their reason for being there? Why did they buy a ticket? Why are they useful to you, if that's relevant?
I so often find, do you find this, that people say it's a show for a family audience?
Yeah. Well,
like there's some kind of generic family out there that every show is written for.
Now come back down to the person who actually bought it, and let's decide who that family is and why they've come to your show as opposed to something else.
Or the other one I get West End audiences as well, where we see it for a West End audience. And I'm like, so who is that?
Yeah. Well, it comes back to the term that I know use in the writing world, which is specificity.
Yeah.
The more specific you can be about who you're trying to attract, there is an audience out there for almost every show on earth, if it's any good. But you may have to find that audience very carefully.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting. If you're taking a show, if you're taking a show to Edinburgh, for a perfect example, if you're taking a show to a big festival like Edinburgh Festival, why are you going? There's a chance you could lose a lot of money. Why are you?
Why tell it? Why tell this show? Why tell it this way? Why tell it in that place?
Yeah.
And why tell it to those people? Yeah. Because Edinburgh audiences are very specific. It's funny, isn't it? I was thinking about this today, finding audiences for my work. There's a project that I want to make that I've already made once and I want to make again. And it's an improvised thing, so it will be different every time. And I don't want to find an audience for it. I want to take it to a place where there is one. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I have to take it to a place where there is one that would be receptive to this kind of storytelling. So that's just always a fascinating question for me. In fact, one of the most interesting parts of making work for me is, who am I telling it to and where the hell are they? And why can't I just find them and then take my work to them? Yeah. Because I think we stumble a lot on getting bums on seats, getting people into houses. There's so much about, it's so expensive to get to London and go to see a show and go out for dinner and those things. Or if you're in a regional theatre, there's all of the things that go with getting people into that building and the expectations around that building. And those are some very specific audiences, and it's great. And also there are ways to get new people into those buildings, but it's how do we do that? And what expectations do we have to conquer before we can do that? And also, do we definitely want to do it in that building? Can we just go somewhere else where the people that we're looking for already hang out? So that, all of those questions I find fascinating. And it's such a big chunk of the Arts Council application as well. It's so fascinating for me that isn't a big pot of questions that we ask at the very beginning when we're asking, what show am I going to write next? I feel like that's
one of the dangers with musical theatre, which is, in a sense, I'm presuming your main audience, in a sense, for the Larder, is the number of people who write a show and then think about it afterwards.
Yeah.
And they,
or they have that generic audience in their head when they're
and then they just think, well, if they just send it to 10 West End producers, someone there will know exactly how to get the West End audience to come and see their show.
Yeah, because that's a thing.
It ain't going to happen.
That's not a thing.
Someone so beautifully, somebody wrote a musical called Waterloo the musical many, many years ago.
Nice.
And on it had draft 26 on the bottom of it.
Oh, wow.
Or whatever number it was. And it went into one of the producers who sent a note back saying, I think it might be quicker to refight the battle. So 2 bits of advice there is, in a sense, don't spend the next 6 years of your life writing Waterloo the musical without thinking about, whether there is a producer out there that will be excited by the idea.
Yeah.
Hence bringing the producer on early. And the second is don't write version 26 on your song sheet. Just write the date.
I now put on the front of my scripts a thing that will remind me which draft it is. I mean, on my own versions of it, I put the number, and I do points. So I do 2.0 and 2.1 and those things. But I also put a description of what I ate before I finished the draft. So some of them are labeled, just after tea and cakes with my friend, or just after, or just before lunch, or I don't know. It just says what meal I've just had.
So when the archivist to your work in 30 years' time begins to catalogue your whole dietary life, will actually be known just from the versions of your script.
Yeah, and mostly it will say after tea and cake.
There's a PhD in there for somebody. How wonderful.
It just reminds me, sometimes I put other things, sometimes I put after that cool thing I watched on the telly, or I don't know, it's just a little reminder for me, but it's a stupid thing. Maybe I'll stop doing it now I've said it out loud. Chris Grady, in the last few minutes of this lovely conversation you had with me late on a Sunday, thank you for that. What do you hope will be happening in musical theatre in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, in the immediate sort of future?
British writers will get better by having the opportunity to have their work seen in production more and more and more, so that each writer can hone their craft more and more and more.
Right, not that we're not already. We are, but that we should see our work. Yeah.
The second is that we get rid of this, the challenge that exists whereby theatre seems to have star actors. Musical theatre seems to have people who hide behind the phantom mask or the Cosette costume or the whatever and are not known by the general public. So that it becomes much more difficult to champion a new work because there aren't musical theatre stars to the general public. Now, actually, the reality TV stuff has sort of slightly changed that, which, whether you like it or not, has been a good thing for audiences. But, when you think of our musical theatre stars, there's a whole generation of incredibly fine actors and actresses over the last 20, 30 years who've all done their Les Mis starring roles or phantom starring roles or whatever, who are completely unknown to the general public.
Yeah, there's some that have done crossover with telly. I mean, Clive Rowe has done telly, and
Sheridan Smith now will pack the theatres. Absolutely fantastic when that happens. But if we can just start crediting our actors, that would be a good start.
Wouldn't it be great? I mean, everyone. Also, I get frustrated about. Well, I don't know how I feel about this. I go back and forth. I'm delighted that successful writers who are already successful writers in other fields are asked to write musicals. I'm delighted because I think appreciating good writing in a musical is a really important thing. But on the other hand, I would like people who write musicals to have a hope in hell. Do you know what I mean? So I go back and forth about that. I feel like ask people who write musicals to write musicals, but then again, there's no commercial property in their names, whereas there is commercial property in the names of people who are already well known, who are already celebrated in other fields. But I'm delighted that people who are celebrated writers are being asked to write musicals. So I kind of go back and forth about that one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next step is either a dedicated company or a dedicated space or a dedicated series of spaces that is going to program musical theatre right the way through the year. That would make an enormous difference.
So would it ideally happen in repertory, do you think, in that old-fashioned way of just let's put it up and see what it is, and meanwhile we're rehearsing something else during the day?
It depends. There's so many different models, but we haven't even got one model, let alone testing. You know, in a sense, there are so many theatre models in different ways across the country.
I think if it's going to be in a building, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be. I grew up in theatre in repertory, working at Leatherhead. Thorndike Theatre in Leatherhead was a proper rep for a while, and it had a paint frame and everything. You know, we built the sets there. It did everything in house, and I learnt every department. I learnt flying, sound, lights, set building, painting, every stage management, everything. You know, on the job, and I think there's something really wonderful that has been massively lost by us losing repertory theatre in this country in the way that, to the extent that we have. And I feel like if there was a rep where we would just, let's make a show, let's make another show, let's rehearse one while we're putting another one up, is a thing that could just serve us so very well.
And I believe that audiences will come very quickly not to require massive production values on music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do that thing where even when we're doing a reading, I hear writers say, well, I've got to have lights and I've got to have costumes, and I'm just like, no, you don't.
No,
just have a piano.
Yeah, if the story's good enough, that's quite enough. So yes, I think there's an enormous amount of learning the craft by practice and doing more of it, and finding that way to get from the R&D projects like From Page to Stage and Perfect Pitch and all of those kind of things into full production, and that's the next step, so that work can be seen in skeletal productions, workshop productions, small fringe productions, and regional repertory or studio productions, or this new wonderful house. And bit by bit, those writers might well get seen as being really worthwhile and fantastic at their craft, plus all the creatives that go with that, and getting to the point that West End producers go, we want that writer or we want that project.
Would you like that theatre to be in London?
Not necessarily. I think it might be easier if it's in London, but not necessarily.
I mean, I think, I don't know. D&D is happening in Birmingham this year, that's right. The big Devoted and Disgruntled weekend event in January is in Birmingham, and I couldn't be happier about that. It means that we are properly a nation of theatre makers, not just a big city of theatre makers and some regional theatres. And I kind of want a rep that just does musical theatre to be not in London. I kind of want it to be somewhere where there isn't that pressure, you know, where you can go to a place where it's just about what you're doing and there isn't that oppressive West End just around the corner, or, you know, I just kind of think I wish there was somewhere in the regions that would maybe do that.
Well, let's keep asking.
Chris Grady, I love you. Thank you so much for chatting so late on a Sunday night. And I'll see you this week sometime for a cup of tea.
That would be marvellous. We've got our reading week this week.
Stay on the line with me for a second. You can tell me all about that, but I'm just going to sign off. So Jen Toxvig on behalf of the Larder saying, welcome back to Google Hangouts. Yay!